I don't know where this channel would be right now without the NFL. Well, first off, I want to start by thanking all of you guys. My subscriber numbers are jumping up. My views are increasing little by little, but we're getting progress. But without the NFL, it would have been a struggle the past 6-7 weeks to come up with content because there has been absolutely nothing that has come out of the NBA. I don't know how you guys feel about the COVID-19 lockdowns. Now, me personally, I thought it was ridiculous to lock down the country at the beginning. I didn't like it. But either way, most states across the country are beginning to ease up on their restrictions. Now, of course, some states are easing up faster than others, but for the most part, it seems that we are moving towards coming out of the nationwide lockdown. Now, I believe that the NBA will be returning soon. Now, will fans be in attendance? Don't know. I haven't heard anything about an NBA return and what it could look like, but this is what I think will happen. I think when the NBA does return, they'll play without fans in the arena to finish out the regular season, which has about 4 or 5 weeks left. Now, once the playoffs begin, I think that the NBA will open the doors for the fans to come to the games. I just can't see there being NBA playoff games without the fans in attendance. That being said, I haven't mentioned the NBA on this podcast since, I believe, mid-March. There just hasn't been anything to talk about with basketball. But today, I finally got a story to talk about in regards to the NBA, and that's the future of Mike D'Antoni. And I'm just going to jump right into it. Not going to beat around the bush with this one. Mike D'Antoni's time with the Houston Rockets is coming to an end. It's over. It's done. After this season, he's out of there. The Rockets could make it to the Western Conference Finals this year, which, by the way, is not going to happen. But even if they did, Mike D'Antoni would still not be brought back. Hell, they could make it to the NBA Finals, and Mike D'Antoni is not going to be back in Houston next year. I don't care what Rockets owner Tilman Fertitta has to say about it. He was asked about Mike D'Antoni back in October, before the start of the regular season. This is what he said, quote, "Everybody tells me that Mike is the right guy for this team. Mike appears to me to be the right guy for this team. I think he's a great coach. He's one of the great offensive minds out there. I truly do not see Mike going anywhere," end quote. That's bullshit. If Tilman Fertitta really believed that Mike D'Antoni was the right coach for the Houston Rockets, then why didn't he offer him a contract extension last summer when Mike D'Antoni wanted one? He didn't offer him an extension because he knows that the Rockets need a new coach in that locker room. They need a new voice in that locker room. They are desperate for a coaching change. The truth is, the Rockets system, D'Antoni's system, as great as the offense is, it's not conducive for winning in the playoffs where it counts in the NBA. Mike D'Antoni's system is not conducive for success in the postseason. But KC, the Rockets were one injury away from making the NBA Finals 2 years ago. I agree 100%. There are always exceptions to every rule. I'm going to get back to the 2018 Western Conference Finals here in just a second. But you look back at Mike D'Antoni's coaching career. He has had success in 2 places, Phoenix and Houston. He failed in Denver, failed in New York with the Knicks, failed in Los Angeles with the Lakers. Now, why is that? Because in all 3 of those places, he didn't have guards to run his fast-paced offensive system. You have got to have 2 great guards in order for Mike D'Antoni's offensive system to be run effectively. In Phoenix, he had Steve Nash, Joe Johnson. In Houston, he's had James Harden, Chris Paul, now Russell Westbrook. Everyone falls in love with Mike D'Antoni's offensive system because it's so dynamic. It's fun to watch. The mid-2000s Suns and the Rockets of today are fun teams to watch. Mike D'Antoni's system works really well in the regular season when the NBA defenses are relaxed. The problem is his teams don't play defense. They never have. Once you get into the playoffs, defense wins games. The 2004-2005 Phoenix Suns, they were the *1 offense in the NBA. They ranked 17th defensively. Now, what happened in the Western Conference Finals? They ran into a buzzsaw called the San Antonio Spurs that was dominant defensively. They smothered Steve Nash the entire series. Damn near swept them. Ended up winning that series in 5 games. The 2017-2018 Houston Rockets, that was the season that Mike D'Antoni had his best shot at winning an NBA title. I honestly feel if Chris Paul doesn't go down with that injury late in Game 5, that the Rockets actually beat the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals, go on to the NBA Finals, and beat LeBron James and the Cavs. Now, why were the Rockets so successful 2 years ago? Most people will think it's because the offense was so elite. They were the #1 offense in the NBA. They were unstoppable. Houston was the #1 offense in the NBA that year. But that's not why they had a long playoff run. The reason they had a long playoff run, the reason they should have made it to the NBA Finals, was because they were elite defensively. That year, Houston was 6th overall in defensive rating in the NBA. The defense is what took them to the Western Conference Finals. Houston won 11 playoff games that year. 6 of those wins, they held their opponent to under 100 points. And that series against Golden State, 2 of the 3 games they beat the Warriors, held the Warriors under 100 points. Look what happened the following year. The offense was still elite. There wasn't much of a drop-off offensively. They dropped from #1 in the league to #2. The defense went from 6th in the NBA all the way down to 17th. Look what happened in the playoffs. They were bounced in the conference semifinals by Golden State, 4-2. So Mike D'Antoni is done in Houston after this season. But I believe the title window for the Houston Rockets is closing, if it's not already closed. I don't know if their owner, Tilman Fertitta, knows it yet, but I think General Manager Daryl Morey, I think he's got a pretty good idea that time is running out. All you got to do is look at what he's done the past 12 months. And to me, it is signs of a man that is grasping at straws, desperate to try to keep that title window just cracked a little bit. The trade of Clint Capella a few months ago was proof of that. Trading Clint Capella signaled that Houston was 100% committed to playing small ball. There's not a guy on the floor taller than 6'7". And it's just not going to work. It is not going to work. Hell, before the league was shut down due to the pandemic, the Rockets were coming off a 4-game losing streak, 3 of those losses to some of the worst teams in the NBA. I didn't agree with trading Chris Paul for Russell Westbrook last summer. People will justify that trade by saying that Russell Westbrook is younger. CP3's past his prime. In all actuality, they're the same player, except Chris Paul plays better defense. And it's hard to argue that he's past his prime with what he's done in Oklahoma City this season. But the problem remains the same in Houston. You've got 2 guards that require the ball in their hands to be effective. I look at the CP3 Westbrook trade as something that the Rockets did to appease to James Harden, because I think they're starting to come to the realization that time is running out and that eventually, if things don't improve, James Harden's going to request a trade. And I could see it happening sooner rather than later, possibly this time next year. But KC, James Harden's got 3 years left on his contract, making $40 million a year. His contract is untradeable. Stranger things have happened in the NBA. Remember when the Rockets signed Chris Paul to that massive contract after the 2018 Western Conference Finals a couple of years ago? Because of Chris Paul's age, everyone thought it was a huge mistake by Daryl Morey and that they would never be able to trade him. Now, it was a huge mistake, but 1 year into the contract, they traded Chris Paul to Oklahoma City. So it's not outside of the realm of possibility that James Harden could be traded. The last thing you want in an NBA locker room is a disgruntled superstar player. James Harden's at a point in his career where he's already made his money. Right now, at his age, it's all about legacy. He wants to win an NBA title. And he's not going to do that in Houston. It's just not going to happen the way that this roster is currently constructed. We have seen star players do this in the past. They've made their money and they leave teams to go chase a title. Karl Malone left the Jazz in the early to mid-2000s to go try and chase a title with the Lakers. LeBron James left Cleveland to head to Miami. Why? Chase a title. Hell, the primary reason that Anthony Davis left New Orleans last season was the chance to win a title. These guys make their money. They want the title for their legacy. That word, legacy, was all we heard from AD last season in New Orleans. It's all about building my legacy at this point. So I think the run in Houston is over. If it's not over, it's damn near over. Who replaces Mike D'Antoni? There's speculation that it could be Jeff Van Gundy. I think that would be a monumental mistake. Jeff Van Gundy's been out of the NBA since 2007. The game today is completely different than it was back 13 years ago. It is so hard to be away from the game for that long and come back, step in, and be successful. Just look out how it's working in the NFL for John Gruden and the Oakland Raiders for proof of that point. There are rumors that it could be Mark Jackson as the next Rockets head coach. Don't like that option either. I never understood the bullshit about how Mark Jackson should somehow get credit for the dynasty in Golden State. He, quote, built the roster that Steve Kerr took over. I think it's bullshit. Steve Kerr deserves all the credit. There's a reason that Mark Jackson hasn't been offered another NBA job since he got fired in Golden State. I think the best coach for the Rockets is Tom Thibodeau. Might be one of the only ways to keep James Harden in Houston. The Rockets need defense. Thibodeau is one of the best defensive coaches in the NBA. Like I said earlier, 2018 was the best chance that Houston had to win a title. It was also the best defense that they've had in the James Harden era. It is going to be critical this summer for Daryl Morey to hire the right head coach. Harden and Westbrook only have a couple of years of prime basketball left. Hiring the right coach is the only way to maybe keep that title window open and keep James Harden in Houston. Now, as far as Mike D'Antoni goes, there's speculation that he might end up in Chicago. I'm sure once the season ends, other teams will come into consideration. I'm not sure that Mike D'Antoni will be coaching in the NBA once his time in Houston ends. March of 2019, he said that he wants to coach another 3 years in the league. But at the time, he was assuming that he would be coaching 3 more years in Houston with James Harden. He thought he was going to get a contract extension last summer, and coaching 3 more years would take him to the end of James Harden's prime. The only place I could see him continue coaching is in Brooklyn. Most teams looking for head coaches are not built to win a championship or contend right away. That's one of the reasons they're looking for a head coach. But the Brooklyn Nets will be ready-made to contend in the Eastern Conference next season once Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant are healthy. Whether or not Mike D'Antoni is the right coach for the Nets is another argument altogether. But that is the only place I could see him coaching next season. At 68 years old, he doesn't have the time to build a championship contender over the next 3 to 5 years. He's got to contend now. He needs to land somewhere where he can contend day one. And Brooklyn is the only place in the league right now where he could do that. All right, that's all for today. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button for me. Click that notification bell to receive all notifications from the channel. I appreciate those of you that have already done so. Leave me a comment in the section below. Let me know what you think about Mike D'Antoni. Are his days in Houston over? And if they are, where will he be coaching next season, if he'll be coaching at all? And do you think that the title window for the Rockets has closed? Let me know what you think. You can follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. You can email me your questions at BTLKC84@gmail.com. I'll see you guys next time.